The wind carried dust across the valley like ghosts of a forgotten war. Samuel Carter wiped his brow as he led his tired horse along the narrow dirt path, his worn boots crunching on dry earth. The year was 1884, and the Arizona Territory was still a place caught between wildness and civilization. He had nothing left, no wife, no children, no land. The drought had taken his farm in Texas, and the fever had taken the rest. When he heard an old prospector was selling a small wooden house near the base of the Chiricahua Mountains for $40, Samuel thought it might be the last chance life offered him. $40 for peace, he muttered as he approached the leaning structure at sunset, seems a fair trade. The house stood lonely beneath a ridge of red stone, the kind of place you could disappear and be forgotten. The seller, a half-drunk man named Willis, spat tobacco juice and grinned. "Place is yours, Sam. Ain't much, but she don't leak none. $40 and you can start over right here." Samuel paid him, shook his hand, and led his horse toward the porch. He didn't notice the faint wisp of smoke curling from behind the house, or the quiet movement through the brush. That night, when the stars came out, cold and bright as chipped glass, Samuel built a fire inside and sat down for the first meal he'd had in days. Beans, bread, and silence. He was just settling to sleep when the door creaked open. Two figures stood in the doorway. A gasp caught in his throat, two young Apache women, barefoot and wrapped in rough blankets, eyes wide with alarm. One held a small hunting knife, the other clutched a faded leather pouch. Samuel raised his hands slowly. "I don't mean no harm," he said softly. They didn't answer. The older one, maybe in her 20s, spoke something sharp and low in Apache, a warning tone. "I just bought this place," he said. "Didn't know anyone was living here." They looked at each other, then back at him, their faces unreadable in the flickering light. The older sister finally said in broken English, "Our home. You buy land, not us." Samuel's stomach tightened. I didn't know. The man who sold it to me, he didn't say." The younger one, barely 17, stepped closer, her eyes filled with fear and defiance. "We stay. Our mother die here." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then you'll stay. I'll make room." The older sister blinked, surprised. "You not send us away?" He shook his head. "This house has got more room than one man needs. If you'll let me stay, too, we'll share." For a long time, the only sound was the fire crackling. Then, the older sister lowered her knife. "I am Tyan," she said. "My sister is Naira." Over the next few days, the awkward silence turned into uneasy coexistence. Tyan rose early each morning, fetching water from the creek, while Naira tended to a small patch of corn behind the house. Samuel kept to himself, repairing the fence and patching the roof. But he noticed things, how they prayed before meals, how Naira hummed when she worked, how Tyan carried sorrow like a cloak she couldn't set down. One evening, as the sky turned the color of old copper, he found Tyan standing by a mound of stones behind the house. "Our mother," she said quietly. "White men burn village, she hide us here. Then, she get sick." Samuel swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. She looked up at him, her dark eyes sharp. "You not like others. I've seen enough hate for one lifetime," he said. "Don't care much for it." For the first time, she smiled faintly. As the weeks passed, the little house began to change. The cold, hollow silence filled with the rhythm of life again, Tyan's calm voice teaching Samuel Apache words, Naira's laughter echoing through the valley. One morning, Samuel woke to find bread baking in the clay oven and Naira feeding his horse. The scent of cornmeal and smoke filled the air. "You work," Tyan said with a teasing grin, "we feed." He chuckled. "That's a fair trade." He began to learn their ways, how to gather yucca, how to mend moccasins, how to read the tracks of deer in dust. And they learned his, how to build a fence straight, how to sharpen tools, how to read simple words from an old Bible he kept. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire, and Samuel would tell stories of his wife and child, both buried by fever in the Texas sun. Tyan would listen in silence, her gaze distant, while Naira's eyes shimmered with sympathy. Once, after a long silence, Tyan said softly, "You carry pain same as we. But pain can grow corn if heart is good." He didn't quite understand then, but he nodded anyway. Trouble came in the shape of riders, 3 men on horses wearing the arrogance of power. They were ranch hands from a nearby settlement, drunk and cruel. Samuel was chopping wood when he saw them approach. "Well, I'll be damned," one of them sneered. "Old Willis said he sold this shack. Didn't tell us he left his squaws behind. Naira shrank behind Tyan, who stepped forward, her chin lifted. Samuel straightened. You best move along, boys. This place ain't yours. The tallest one spat. Ain't yours either, farmer. You think you can shack up with Indians and play house? The tension was thick. Samuel gripped his axe. I said move along. One of them reached for his pistol, then Samuel swung. The axe handle struck the man's hand, and the gun fell into the dirt. A scuffle broke out, fists and fury flying. Tyan shouted, grabbing Naira's arm. When the dust cleared, the men limped off, swearing vengeance. Samuel's lip was bleeding, his shirt torn, but the sisters were safe. You fight for us, Naira said softly. He shrugged. A man protects his home. Tyan looked at him long and hard, something new in her eyes, respect, maybe, or trust. Then this your home now, too. Winter came early that year. The nights grew long and bitter, and the three of them huddled close by the fire. Samuel taught Naira to play his old harmonica, and her laughter made even the cold feel gentle. Tyan began weaving blankets to sell at the trading post, saving the coins in a jar. One evening, snow began to fall softly outside, and Samuel found himself staring at the two women, sisters bound by love, surviving against all odds, and he realized something. This wasn't just shelter anymore. It was family, but fate wasn't done testing them. In February, a troop of U.S. cavalry arrived in the valley, led by a lieutenant with orders to round up any remaining Apache living off reservation lands. Samuel met them at the edge of his property, his heart pounding. You got two Indian women living here? The officer demanded. They're under my roof, Samuel said. They're harmless, just trying to live. Doesn't matter. Orders are orders. They'll be taken to Fort Bowie for relocation. Samuel's fists clenched. You can't take them. They've done nothing wrong. The officer's hand went to his holster. Step aside, farmer. Don't make me arrest you. Tyan and Naira stood behind him, silent, their faces pale with fear. Samuel took a deep breath and said quietly, then you'll have to go through me. For a moment, no one moved. The lieutenant looked into the farmer's eyes and saw something unyielding there, something forged in grief and loss and love. Finally, he lowered his hand. You didn't see us, he muttered to his men. Let's move out. As the soldiers rode away, Samuel's knees nearly buckled with relief. Tyan placed her hand on his arm. You risk your life, she whispered. Why? He looked at her and smiled faintly. Because family ain't always born, it's found. Spring bloomed like forgiveness. The valley turned green, and the creek ran full again. Tyan planted new crops beside Samuel's field, and Naira painted bright patterns on the fence posts. One morning, a trader from town arrived with a letter and a pouch of coins. Inside was a deed, ownership of the land, signed and sealed. It turned out that Willis, the drunk who sold him the house, had been wanted for fraud. The sheriff, seeing Samuel's name and hearing how he'd protected two native women from harm, granted him full claim. The valley was now truly theirs. That evening, as the sun sank behind the red ridges, Samuel, Tyan, and Naira stood together, the golden light wrapping them in quiet grace. You paid $40, Tyan said softly, and got a home, two hearts, and new life. Samuel smiled, tears in his eyes. Best bargain I ever made. Naira took his hand, grinning. And we got a brother. He laughed, the sound echoing across the wide, forgiving land. The house that once held sorrow now overflowed with laughter, bread, and music. And somewhere in the whisper of the wind, Samuel thought he heard the voice of Tyan's mother, soft, peaceful, proud. In the heart of the frontier, three souls, broken by loss, found healing not through blood or name, but through kindness. And in that little $40 house beneath the mountains, they built something no gold or land could buy, family. The Arizona sun was sinking behind the red cliffs when Samuel Carter arrived at the edge of a forgotten valley. The wind was dry, the ground cracked, and his horse limped with exhaustion. He had lost everything, his farm, his family, his faith. An old prospector had told him of a small wooden house for sale at the base of the Chiricahua Mountains, $40, cash. $40 for peace, Samuel muttered as he rode up to the shack. The seller, a half-drunk man named Willis, grinned as he took the coins. She ain't fancy, but she's yours now. No leaks, no law trouble. Samuel didn't notice the faint smoke behind the ridge or the pair of silent eyes watching from the trees. That night, under a sky of frozen stars, Samuel built a fire and sat to eat the first hot meal he'd had in days, beans, bread, and silence. He was just lying down when the door creaked open. Two figures stood in the doorway, barefoot, wrapped in blankets, eyes wide with fear. Two young Apache women. Samuel froze. The older one, tall and sharp-eyed, held a knife. The younger clutched a small pouch to her chest. "I mean no harm," Samuel said gently, raising his hands. "This is my house. I bought it today." The older one's voice was calm but cold. "You buy land, not us." Samuel blinked. "I didn't know anyone lived here." The younger sister stepped forward, trembling. "Our mother died here. This is our home." Samuel's voice softened. "Then you'll stay. I'll make room." The older one frowned. "You not send us away?" He shook his head. "Ain't got no reason to. There's enough space for three." They studied him for a long, silent moment. Then the older one lowered her knife. "I am Tyan," she said. "My sister, Naira." From that moment, the three strangers began to share the same roof. The first days were quiet, awkward. Tyan rose before dawn to fetch water. Naira tended a small corn patch behind the house. Samuel repaired the fence and mended the roof, careful not to intrude. He noticed how Naira hummed when she worked and how Tyan carried herself with quiet pride, her eyes full of something between sorrow and defiance. One evening, he found Tyan standing beside a mound of stones behind the house. "Our mother," she said quietly. "White men burned our village. She hid us here. Then, she gets sick." Samuel removed his hat. "I'm sorry. You not like others?" she asked, watching him. He shook his head. "I've seen too much hate. I want none of it." For the first time, her expression softened. Days turned into weeks. The three of them fell into rhythm, Samuel chopping wood, Tyan baking cornbread, Naira laughing as she fed his horse. He began teaching them English words from an old Bible. They taught him Apache names for the mountains and the stars. At night, they sat by the fire while Samuel played a slow tune on his harmonica. The music filled the house with a warmth words couldn't. One evening, Tyan said, "You carry pain, same as us. But pain can grow good things if heart is kind." He didn't understand fully, but he nodded. Then trouble came. Three riders approached one morning, ranch hands from the nearby settlement, drunk and looking for trouble. Samuel was chopping wood when he saw them. "Well, I'll be damned," one said. "Old Willis sold this place, huh? Didn't say nothing about the Indian women." Naira shrank behind Tyan. Samuel stepped forward. "You best move along. This land's mine now." The tallest man laughed. "Yours? You playing husband to savages now?" Samuel gripped his axe. "I said move along." When one reached for his gun, Samuel swung. The axe handle cracked against the man's wrist. A fight broke out. Mud, fists, fury. Samuel took a punch to the jaw but stayed standing. The men stumbled away, cursing. "You fight for us," Naira whispered. Samuel spat blood into the dirt. "A man protects his home." Tyan looked at him for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Then this your home too." Winter came early that year. The nights were long and bitter, but the small house glowed with warmth and laughter. Naira learned to play the harmonica, and Tyan's weaving earned them food from the trading post. Sometimes, when the fire was low, Samuel thought about how strange life was. He had bought a house for $40, but somehow gained a reason to live again. One snow-covered morning, Tyan placed a small carved stone in his hand. "Apache sign," she said. "Means protection. For family." Samuel smiled. "Then we'll protect each other." But the world beyond their valley wasn't so kind. In February, soldiers rode into the valley, blue coats, hard eyes. A lieutenant dismounted in front of Samuel's field. "You harbor Apache here, they're under my roof," Samuel said steadily. "They've harmed no one." "Orders are orders," the officer replied. "All Apaches must report to Fort Bowie." Samuel's fists clenched. "They've lost everything. You can't take them. Step aside, farmer. Don't make me." "No." Samuel's voice cracked like thunder. "Not today." The officer hesitated, seeing something unbreakable in Samuel's eyes. After a tense silence, he finally nodded to his men. "You didn't see us," he said. "Let's move on." When they were gone, Samuel turned to find Tyan's eyes filled with tears. "You risk your life," she whispered. He smiled. "Family's worth the risk." Spring came gently, like a sigh of forgiveness. The valley turned green again, the creek bubbling with life. Tyan planted beans beside Samuel's corn rows. Naira painted bright symbols on the fence posts, laughing as the paint stained her fingers. One morning, a rider came from town, a trader carrying a letter. Inside was a deed, stamped and sealed, full legal ownership of the land. Willis, the man who sold it, had been caught for fraud. The sheriff, hearing Samuel's story, transferred the property in his name as reward for his courage. The little $40 house was now truly theirs. That evening, as the sunset painted the mountains in gold, Samuel, Tyan, and Naira stood together in the yard. The air smelled of new grass. And hope. You paid $40, Tyan said softly, and got 2 sisters, 1 home, and a new life. Samuel's eyes glistened. Best deal I ever made. Naira grinned, slipping her small hand into his. And we got a brother. He laughed, the sound echoing across the open valley. The once empty house now overflowed with warmth, bread baking in the oven, music from the harmonica, and laughter that reached the stars. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Samuel swore he could hear Tyan and Naira's mother's voice whispering in the wind, gentle, peaceful, proud. He would look around that little home beneath the Chiricahua Mountains and smile.